Well, thanks so much, everybody, for joining us tonight to learn about the Lake Dalrymple property that the Conservancy is working to protect, and also just some general information about the Conservancy in case you don't know already about us. So let's jump right in. We'd love to know where you're from if you feel comfortable putting in the chat if you live in the Cardin area or maybe you live somewhere broader. I want to acknowledge that the land that we're on is the traditional territory of Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi people, and we are in the Williams Treaty. I'm Tanya Clark. I'm a staff member with the Couchiching Conservancy. I have been with the Conservancy for 12 years now, a surprisingly long time. It went by in a flash. I'm the fundraising engagement manager, and so my role for this property in particular is raising the money in order to make sure that we protect it. And I'll let Dale introduce herself.
My name is Dale Ledbeater. I'm a professional biologist. I had a career in consulting for a whole bunch of years, but I'm retired now, so I get to just follow my heart. And one of my favorite things is conservation biology and trying to protect really special areas in perpetuity.
Great. Dale has been on our board for a few years now. We're happy to have her.
Mm. Oh, yeah, forgot about that.
That's okay. So today I'm going to share a little bit about what exactly is a land trust, why the Conservancy exists, talk a little bit about where we work, what we've done specifically in the Cardin region, and of course, what we're working on next. That's the most exciting part. The first parts will be fast. So what exactly is a land trust? Oh, all of a sudden I'm frozen. There we go. So a land trust, land is what we protect, environmentally significant land in particular, and then we hold it in trust for the community to ensure that there's green spaces left for future generations and beyond. And we do that in a number of ways. We protect land permanently through donation, purchase, and we have a number of conservation easements. And that land can never be developed. And it's something that you can always, be reassured that it will be here. I think that we really see a lot of changes to our community. And this is something that you can look at and know that it will be here forever, which is not something that we necessarily have all the time. Our organization was started in 1993 by this lovely group of people. These are some of our founders. All of them are still involved today. And at the time when they started the Conservancy, they were looking around in the community and seeing a lot of wetland loss. They were seeing, changes and loss of habitat and feeling this like feeling of what do we do? Like we feel like we can't do anything to stop this. And so at the time, Ron Reed in the center there in the bottom, he was working in conservation and he was working for what's now called Ontario Nature. And he was inspired by the land trust movement in the United States. And so he went through a process of learning about what exactly does that mean to establish a land trust. And, these people all banded together and started the organization, and we've done a whole bunch since then. So now today, in over 30 years, we've protected over 15,000 acres of environmentally significant land between 59 nature reserves and easements. We work in partnership with organizations like Nature Conservancy of Canada, Ontario Parks, Wildlife Preservation Canada, and others. And there's over 20 kilometers of trails that are open to the public. We work with about 300 volunteers, and they contribute roughly 5,000 hours annually to a whole bunch of projects and programs to look after the land. So here's what it looks like. Here's all of the places that we protect. I hope you'll visit our website to look at this map a little closer, because obviously sharing it on a Zoom screen can be a little small. So the outline is the area that we work in, and then we've called each corridor a different name. So Cardin Alvar, Black River Wildlands, Matchedash to Minising, and Bass Lake West. So these yellow colors shown on the map are the areas that are not protected yet, but we hope that would be protected in the future. That mapping has been done through species at risk occurrences, what kind of land is still not developed and could potentially be protected in the future, things like that. So that's where that's all come together. And then the dark green areas are nature reserves or easements that Kuching Conservancy or another partner organization has protected. So you can see there's a more detailed map later in the presentation, but you can see there's a lot of land protected in Carden, which goes up into the Black River Wildlands and then goes up into Queen Elizabeth Wildlands Provincial Park. And whenever we look at protecting land, we really look at corridors. So what that means is connections between other undeveloped natural areas. Because if you think about, you're a moose and you're trying to navigate a certain region, if it's already developed, you are facing a lot more barriers. If there's a highway, that complicates life, I'm sure. So the conservancy is very strategic about where we're protecting land. And if you were to put all of this land together, I don't know if you can imagine what 15,000 acres of land looks like, but if you were to put this all together into one, it's double the size of the city of Aurelia. It's about 11,000 football fields. Or if you shop at Costco, it's the equivalent of over 4,000 Costco's. It's not clear to me on if that counts the parking lot or not, but either way, 4,000 Costco's is a lot. And all of the work that we do is made possible by our 11 staff members. Some of them are pictured here. We have a really active board of directors that governs the work that we do. And again, we work with about 300 volunteers, and we have over 800 people who are members, monthly donors, supporters, who really back the work that we do and believe in what we're doing. So to give you a little bit more about the different staff, I won't go through each one without a pointer, but we have an executive director, we have a conservation biologist, we have somebody who does mapping for the organization. We also have a youth stewardship coordinator. And then we have our reserve steward, and then we have staff like myself who do fundraising, and then a few other staff that do office work and like community engagement. And as you can imagine, looking after 15,000 acres is quite a big job. All the landscapes are quite different and require different things. So land stewardship is a really big piece of what we do. So we're dealing with invasive species management, such as Phragmites and garlic mustard and buckthorn, and making sure that those plants don't spread further and do further harm to the land and also to the species. We do community science monitoring for a number of species, such as bats and snakes. We do water quality monitoring. Volunteers are very heavily involved in those. And then if there's a trail on the nature reserve, we do maintenance of the trail, including managing hazardous trees and dealing with any trespass issues. On top of looking after the land, we have a whole bunch of projects and programs. We opted not to include them all on one slide because it would be way too many. But most of these are volunteer projects that people are involved with. So such as ambassadors, which go out in the community and represent us at events. We have a youth program. We're also working on our first ever eco passage on Monk Road. That's what's pictured here. They're sitting on the box culvert having a break. I was out at the eco passage last summer, and it was very hard work, I can tell you. We also have Carden Bird Blitz, which has been going on for, I think, over 20 years now. And then again, we have many community science programs that we run. And as mentioned, we have a number of trails and footpaths that are open to the public to visit. There's only one in Ramera, that would be Sweetwater Farm. And otherwise, our most popular trail is Grants Woods Nature Reserve, which is the location of our office, which happens to be closed at the moment while we're going through a little office renovation. But maybe you're familiar with the Conservancy because of some of these properties. So specifically about the Carden Alvar and Ramera, it's special for so many reasons. It's a globally rare landscape. It has these extreme environmental swings, meaning that the landscape floods and then otherwise is like very dry and kind of harsh conditions. So the plants that you see in this region are very special because they can withstand these environmental swings. And it's also deemed an important bird and biodiversity area because so many birds are there and they know how special it is. So you didn't know that you were getting a quiz tonight, but in your mind, if you could answer this question, how many species does the cardin alvar support? I'll just give you a second to decide what your answer is. If you guess that it's 250, you would be correct. There are over 250 different species of bird that rely on the cardin alvar for nesting, breeding, migration, all of these things. The bird pictured here is an Eastern loggerhead shrike, which is an endangered species. Loggerhead, they have two key areas. One is in Cardin and one is in Napanee. And so it's a very interesting songbird. Do I have that right, Dale? It's a songbird.
Yeah. Mhm.
Its nickname is a butcher bird, which is sort of surprising.
Well,
And
it's a songbird, but it's a predator in the way that raptors are a predator. And so that's what makes it special.
okay. So Cardin also, on top of the incredible bird list, also supports 38 mammals and many butterflies and dragonflies. And this is a zoomed in look at the Cardin region and what we have been able to protect over the years. Um, in the early days of the Conservancy, they worked on an integrated conservation strategy for Cardin because they knew how special it was and how rare it was. And so this altogether is about 15,000 acres when we include all of the land that other partners have also done. So a really big corridor has been coming together over the years, which is really such a special thing to be able to have this much protected land. And Dale is going to tell us more about this special land.
I've been coming to this landscape since I was an undergraduate at the University of Toronto in the late 60s, if you can imagine. But the big draw then was because there was research going on in this area on the plants, because the plants were so special. At the time we started coming up here, loggerhead shrike was not an endangered species. It was just a run of the mill bird that was fun to see, but we didn't attach any particular importance to it. There was no species at risk act. And so we were just there to look at the plants. So our understanding of this area has matured over the years because when I first started coming up here, the Ministry of Natural Resources didn't think that it was a special habitat. They thought that it was just an artifact of cattle ranching because, of course, the north end of the city of Kawartha Lakes and into Ramera there, that's cattle country. And but at that time, the ranchers didn't have as many cattle on the landscape, and so it was beginning to grow up into shrubs. We now realize that it's part of a system that stretches across Ontario. It's called the Land Between. It is 240 kilometers in length and it's 50 kilometers wide. And this was created by the glaciers as they retreated. They washed away a lot of the soil in these areas where bedrock is very close to the surface. And it covers the contact zone between the limestone to the south and the Precambrian shield to the north. And where we're situated, talking about the Cardin Alvar, is centered on Cardin Township in the city of Kawartha Lakes. But Lake Dalrymple, the area, this property that we have an opportunity to purchase, it represents the westernmost extension of the Cardin Plain. As it moves, it doesn't pay any attention to municipal boundaries. So that is in Ramera Township in Simcoe. So you've got to advance. Yes. So what is an alvar? Well, basically, it's just shallow soil over limestone, but it creates these unique habitats. As I said, it's a gift of the glaciers, and we have unique freeze thaw regimes here. And also this flood regime where you get flooding in the spring and flooding in the fall and bone dry baking drought all summer long. It isn't just when we have a drought, it's every summer long. So the species that live here have to be able to tolerate that flood area. You go to some of these places in the spring and it looks like a wetland, complete with frogs calling and the whole bit. But you come back in the summer and it's completely bone dry. So it really is, it has a rhythm to it. When you want to go to the Alvar in the spring, you've got one completely different set of flowers. The first ones to flower are the yellow early buttercups, turns it all yellow. Come back in 2 weeks, and the prairie smoke has turned everything pink with the flowers. Come back in 2 weeks, and the prairie smoke has lifted their furry seed pods up into the air, and it just looks like it's all on fire. And it carries on that way through the whole summer. So you can go there every 2 weeks and it looks completely different. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of alvars. And of course, that's controlled by the depth of the soil, because the deeper the soil, the better able it is to support shrubs. And then it gets a bit deeper, and then you get trees occupying it. And depending on that available nutrition and the water resources, you can get into some woodlands. The picture here shows you the limestone pavement, very level, so that the water pools on that very level pavement and it just doesn't go anywhere. And then if you get a little bit of soil, you get the grasslands that you can see. And then behind that, you can see shrubs and a little bit of savanna. And then farther back, there's actually some woodland. And you'll be able to see that in some of the videos that are to come. And this shows you the power of water. So I've already said that the limestone is flat and the water just sits there. However, and most of Carden is very, very solid limestone like that. But there are places where the water sits on the limestone and it dissolves the calcium carbonate that's in the limestone or the dolostone, depending on what you've got. And it's slightly acidic, and it finds these little cracks and fissures, these little breaks in the limestone. And where you have them, they slowly eat away with the acid. And then, of course, in the winter, it freezes and breaks things apart. And over the thousands of years, it just gradually opens up these we'll call them grikes or crevices. And some of the really big ones are big enough to climb into. Now, I don't really approve of these guys doing this, but people are part of the ecosystem too, so you have to have some tolerance. But what's unique about these is that they very often have water in the bottom, or they certainly do in the spring. And so the niche that's in these grikes is unique, and we have rare plants growing in them sometimes. And so they're really interesting places. Of course, there's also a lot of poison ivy in them sometimes, so think twice before you jump into that grike. The Alvar is a biodiversity hotspot. When I showed you that map of the land between, in terms of the biology, what we have are species from the south that reach their most northerly distribution at the contact zone. And then we have all kinds of species from the north that, again, they have their most southerly distribution. And so you get this overlap here, which makes the area extremely rich, richer than the individual south and north habitats all by themselves. So as a result of that, it's become a refuge. So we have so many species at risk, not only plants and birds, but reptiles and insects. It's a really, really important place for that. And we're in a biodiversity crisis. And so we need to choose places where you get the biggest outcome, the biggest protection for as many species as possible for the investment that you put into it. As I mentioned before, there's all sorts of rare plants, which is why I started coming here in the 60s. Pollinators are just legion. It's an incredible place to come for wasps. Now, you might not get too excited about wasps, but you start to look at them and they are so different than what you get in the south. And there's not so many wasps in the north, but in the south for sure. And then you have these extensive wetlands with, again, specialized species. And we're going to be talking more about that. Climate in Alvar. You always have to have a climate slide, don't you? I mean, it's just de rigueur. But it happens to be true for Alvars because, first of all, if we purchase the aggregate and we don't excavate it, aggregate production, of course, releases a lot of carbon dioxide. So keeping it in the ground is a really good strategy to minimize the carbon that's exposed. But even better on the Alvar is that we have grassland species with massive roots that are capable of sequestering and storing carbon that rivals the amount that would be sequestered in trees or exceeds it. And you also have all of the shrubs and all of these specialized species that are adapted to drought conditions and fire going through. So they have that biomass in their roots, and that's where the carbon is kept. From a water management point of view, they're extremely effective because even though the soils are shallow, they still act like a sponge. And then since it's level, the water just sits there, so you don't get flooding. It just gradually trickles its way out, or else it gets evapotranspirated back up into the clouds, and it rains and it drops it into the lake, but in an ecologically appropriate way, and not it doesn't contribute to these flashy floods that can cause so much damage. And so, of course, what makes this all possible or necessary is because of the threats that we face. We're on shoreline habitat, and of course, if you've got shoreline habitat anywhere, there's a desire to develop it. That was one of the things that was possible here. Aggregates was possible as well. I only learned that in through one of these presentations that there was a historical application on these lands that didn't go forward, thank heavens. We just had our encounter with a solar farm, and like aggregates, we know that you have to have these things, and we support solar energy, heaven knows. But what they told us was that they had looked at maps and they saw the Alvar and they thought, well, there's nothing here. So we can put a solar farm here. It's a perfect place. And we very quickly had to educate them that no, 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 there is a lot here, that this is a highly, it's a very busy place. There's a lot of things happening here. And you just can't make those assumptions. And happily, that's not going forward. However, the NORAD defense installation is going forward immediately north of my house. So it's a little bit unnerving. One of the things that concerns me is that there's no provisions in the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan for environmentally friendly ranches. Like there's some protection for agriculture, but not for the ranching community. So these are things that we really want to encourage. And also that the recreation that occurs on these lands, which is one of our objectives, but it needs to be done so in a sensitive way. So people have to be monitoring, paying attention, and without that kind of oversight, it certainly can be a threat. But our opportunities, on the other hand, certainly for this project, is that we get to purchase these substantial areas that protect these ecosystem services. And it does it forever. It's not going to be subject to a government changing their priorities. Understood, governments are there to do that. And that's why you have to have a number of different ways of conserving wildlife habitat. And we are one of those ways. You need to exploit all your opportunities. And so we'd like to think that purchasing the land is good planning because it balances resource uses versus our ecosystem.
Did Dale freeze for anyone else or just for me?
I was just wondering if I was frozen because
Yeah,
Dana was
I thought
frozen.
maybe I had a problem.
Okay, it's Dale, not me. Maybe we'll just give her internet a second to catch up and hopefully it will connect again.
Oh, looks like she just left. Maybe she's joining, like leaving and coming back.
Yeah. Okay, well, I can carry on in her place. Oh, there's Dale. Oh, you're muted, Dale.
I don't know what that was about.
And me either. Welcome back.
One of
Uh-oh.
the oh, what?
It's okay. I thought it froze again. You're okay.
Oh, okay. No, it's telling me my internet is unstable. So if you lose me again, you're over to you, Tanya. Anyway, we were told at one of our meetings by someone on the Trails Committee that there's not a lot of trails in Ramara and there's some maintenance issues. And so, of course, we consider people to be part of our ecosystem. And so we do want to provide opportunities. And in this case, it's a unique opportunity to walk to the shoreline of Lake Dalrymple and look out over the lake. It's just fabulous in the upper area because there's a huge field of monoman, which most people call wild rice, but that's not the right name because it's not rice. And so we use the Anishinaabe name now to describe that species and trying to make it more popular. This is a really important resource. It's culturally important. And certainly, if we didn't have monoman, then the the scholars say that settlement may never have happened because we wouldn't have survived without the First Nations sharing Manoomin. Um, so that's where the opportunities for reconciliation come in. Because we have an opportunity to work with the Chippewas of Rama on this project. Don't know where that's going yet, but we are talking to them. So this is our new project. Yeah, just shows the shoreline there. I think you can go ahead. And you can see Lake Dalrymple there on the right. And next slide shows you exactly where the property is. Um, you can see the Alvar is the brown on the left-hand side. The Alvar itself is the brown, but there's a little bit of wetland. There's treed areas. There's shrub areas. It's very, very diverse. It's a really special piece of property in the upper Lake Dalrymple there. And this is a video, I believe. Oh, what happened? Yeah, there we go. So here we are zooming in. This is going west over the edge of the lake and passing the cedars that are at the edge. Lots of cedars on the Alvar and lots of junipers on the juniper is practically a signature species. And this one I really like because you can see the darker greens on the left. And that is darker green because that's where the water is just tending to collect. And you actually get wetland species there that can also tolerate drought. So it gives you this incredible mosaic, even when they're grasslands. And we don't have a lot of native grasslands in Ontario. Most of them have been converted either to pasture or to agriculture. And here we are south, flying south towards the southern boundary. And you can see the edge of the limestone gets to be a couple of meters tall. And there are cedar growing out of those limestone. And I was just at a lecture at the Royal Ontario Museum about ancient cedars. And one of the things that I would like to be looking into is to see how old those cedars are, because we have cedars in Ontario that date over 3,000 years old.
How do you tell how old they are?
Well, part of it is mythology, and part I have to find a dead cedar that we can take a cookie out of and then look at it under a microscope and count the rings.
Ah, okay.
Don't want to be cutting any live ones down. Okay, we have a quiz. Tanya, it's going to play you.
I'm ready.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot of species on this landscape. There's 23 expected and confirmed species at risk. And one of the species that we have heard and seen a number of times sounds like that. Oh,
Can you
I
play that
froze
again?
Yeah. So if you
Okay.
guess a belted kingfisher, you are correct.
I knew it.
Yeah,
I am
kingfisher.
biased though.
Yeah. Um, Kingfishers, of course, they're one of the first. So that sound, I didn't really hear it, but hopefully the others did. It's easy to find on the internet. Um, but that's a sound that we're going to be hearing very soon because this snow is melting like crazy out there. And no, they're not at risk. The green tree frogs are not at risk. I just saw that question come up. Um, they're it's just one of the many species. Actually, I'm glad you said that because there's a lot of emphasis on species at risk. However, it's really important to recognize that we need high functioning habitat for healthy species so that they don't become endangered. And so putting together these corridors, acquiring this landscape protects the high quality habitats. And at the same time, we get species at risk. The reason why we talk so much about species at risk is, first of all, because we don't want to lose those species. That's the most important thing. But the only way to get funding in order to do the research and to do the hard work to improve their habitats is to highlight them. But then while you're doing the species at risk work, you also benefit many of the more common species. So the green tree frogs are a relatively common species for us. Actually, the western chorus frogs are relatively common up here as well. And yet they have been listed as a species of concern. Um, so do you want to go on to the next one? Ah, now, of course, I'm a botanist, and when I got out there in the canoe, this was taken in September, so this is in its autumn finery. This is called um, this is called water willow, or it's also called swamp loosestrife. But I'm not so keen on that name because purple loosestrife has given the family such a bad name. And this one is the native species. And so this one we want to encourage. It's a really interesting plant because it has these spongy roots that grow out from the edge of the lake and into the lake and make these floating mats that are erosion control for the shoreline so that you're not subject to effects that are going to damage the shoreline, which is so common in lakes up in Halliburton, for instance. And furthermore, because it's this spongy floating stuff, where there's been some dieback and it's kind of um, um, packed down, or if a beaver's been in it and kind of stomped around in there, it's perfect habitat for black tern. And black tern is one of our species at risk. And so these are really important because they're gorgeous from their themselves. They perform a really important ecosystem service, and they could be habitat for a species at risk. Next. Aha. I don't know if you know what this one is. They're a pretty common bird, but he's at his, or she, not sure, you can't tell the sexes apart, at the northern limit of its distribution. So this is one of our species when we talk about species with southern distributions that end at the land between. This is one of them. This is a green heron. And he's a little deceptive because he's got this telescopic neck that if he was reaching out to capture a morsel of food, he all of a sudden looks twice as tall. And they're really interesting birds because they're one of the very few birds that use tools in order to get food. And what he'll do is capture an insect like a dragonfly and disable it, drop it onto the surface of the water in hopes that a fish comes so that he gets to eat the fish, which is a much more substantial food. So they're absolutely fascinating birds, and certainly they are on our landscape. And of course, Bambi. Who doesn't love Bambi? On our property, on this property, there are there's a lot of deer, and they are part of the ecosystem as well. They're herbivores, and so they modify the vegetation. You want to keep them under control, which is really one of the really good reasons why people are on the landscape, although some deer aren't particularly shy of people anymore. Um, what's important about this property, for species like that, we have access to the lake because, of course, most of our lakes are developed all the way around, or else it's too swampy, and the animals have a hard time getting down to the lake. And if they do go down to the lake in developed areas, they're all stressed out. Whereas at a place like the Lake Dalrymple Alvar, these animals can get down to the lake and live their good lives without that additional stress.
The neat thing about this deer in particular also is that this photo was taken on the Lake Dalrymple property. Our conservation biologist and I were out there. It was a really hot day, and we were walking across the Alvar, and this deer ran across the tree line, looked right at us, was very curious about us, and then ran away. It was very neat. And Toby has a great camera, so that helps too.
And this one is, again, you mentioned Toby, who's our conservation biologist. And if you ever get a chance to go in the field with Toby, take it because it's very educational. And from his kayak, he noticed this little stripy bird from miles away, so hard to see, and realized that it's an immature black-crowned night heron. And it's a really good example of why we need these corridors across the landscape, because the typical habitat for black-crowned night heron is on very large bodies of water. Lake Dalrymple is sort of on the edge. It could be big enough, but really, when we're talking about big bodies of water, we're really talking about Lake Simcoe and Georgian Bay. That's typically where you would find it. Mostly, I found them when I was younger down on the Lake Ontario shoreline, and they nest in colonies in the way that great blue herons do. Um, but they need these habitats because the immature birds leave the nests and they wander all over southern Ontario. So even though the breeding habitat is generally around the Great Lakes and Lake Simcoe, they need this habitat in order to have loafing areas and places where they can feed in order to make the long migration south. Now, interestingly enough, in the old atlas, in the 2005 atlas, there were no black-crowned night herons breeding anywhere close to Lake Dalrymple. But in 2024, two were reported, which is really interesting because it's really not good habitat. But what happens sometimes is that the young birds, if they're only a year old and this is the first time they've nested, they don't get the primo nesting opportunities because the older birds kick them out. And so they kind of try on habitat for size. So in 2024, two birds apparently nested, but there hasn't been a record since then. Well, only one more year. So it'll be interesting to come back in the spring of 2026 and see whether or not they actually have started to nest on Lake Dalrymple. And they make these big floppy nests in colonies. And so they're not particularly difficult to see. So it was a really, really good sighting on Toby's part. Very exciting. Oh, yes. The egrets started. Jen saying, have I seen the egrets? And there was a great white egret out there the day that we were out in the canoes. And just before I hand it back to Tanya, that is the Manuman fields. And you can see how extensive they are. And such an important plant.
Mhm. Yeah, we went out when we did the interviews with Dale and with Toby. We paddled along the shoreline and saw all of the Minomen and all of these birds. And it was really quite the experience because we're paddling to the bottom end of the lake. It gets really marshy, it's quite shallow. I mean, particularly on the shoreline. And it was just like a ruckus of bird calls, geese and swans, and all of these waterfowl flying out of the Minomen. I'm sure that they were wondering what we were doing there. It was quite special to do that.
Very exciting. And yet there were
Mhm.
people on the lake as well. It was
Yeah.
just a gorgeous day, an idyllic
Hmm.
day.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it was. Thanks, Dale. That was so interesting. So this picture is again on the shoreline of the property. This is some of our members of the board of directors. So they've gone out on the land with us and seen it, and they are very excited about this opportunity. Um, I don't know if it was already said, but the property is 430 acres in size. It's not the biggest property that the Conservancy is involved with, but it is one of the larger ones. And whenever there's opportunities to protect large landscapes, those are particularly special. And obviously, this shoreline is incredible for so many reasons. It is beautiful. Again, we've paddled along it. The Alvar juts out into the lake. It sort of looks like you're on Georgian Bay. So it's a quite sort of a surprising landscape as you're going along. I wasn't expecting to see it like that. And to be able to have an opportunity to protect shoreline is a very rare one. The other lands that the Conservancy is involved with, there's some that have rivers, but from what I can tell, there's only one other property that is actually a lakefront property. So to me, I love paddling. And so whenever there's a connection between land and water, those are the places that I personally feel very excited about. And on top of it, just being quite a beautiful landscape. So as I've gotten to know this landscape over the, I don't know, last 6 months or so, I've been doing some looking into the area. And one thing that I found about is there's another name for Lake Dalrymple, and I have gotten the specific pronunciation of it. So I have Ke Che Be Bob Gong. So say that fast. So that's a Wendat word, and it's a historically significant fishing and trapping area. So maybe you just learned something new about Lake Dalrymple. Protecting this land would mean so much for the community. I know there's so much going on in Carden, in Romera, in Aurelia with annexation, in Oro-Medonte with annexation, and Dale talked about the different threats that are happening in this region and beyond. And being able to purchase and protect this land would ensure that it would be here forever, which is a big deal, honestly. I like personally, I feel very connected to this work. Obviously, I've been here doing it for a long time, and that's a special feeling to know that you can go and you'll know that it's there in 5 years and 10 years and 15 years. It will mean a healthier lake for the community. We are planning to have the walking trail open to the public, and it will ensure that there is shoreline habitat and breeding habitat. I talked to Toby a lot about the shoreline connection. So we're not just protecting the land, we're also protecting the near shoreline ecosystem. So that's quite special. And of course, it's a legacy for future generations. If you have family or grandkids, this is something that you can say you contributed to and you helped to make possible. Over time, I've been learning a lot more about ecosystem services. If that's a new term for you, it essentially means the services that the land gives us that we don't directly pay for. So there's a whole bunch of different ecosystem services, but the one that I have learned about recently is about wetlands. So I have notes on this because I want to get it right. Ontario has lost more than 72% of wetlands south of the Canadian Shield, and the losses continue. And Ontario wetland benefit transfer values often range from $3,000 to $15,000 per acre per year. So that's the value that wetlands provide us in filtration and flood control. Lake Dalrymple Alvar is mostly Alvar, but it does have 28.2 acres of wetland. So that's equivalent to about 21 football fields. So that means that it is contributing at the low end about $85,000 per year in services to the broader community, and at the high end, $420,000 a year. Really incredible. Um, yeah, this is just such an exciting opportunity for the community, and it is the biggest project that the Conservancy has ever undertaken in all of my time with the Conservancy. To raise this amount of money is completely new to us. So it's been a big endeavor, but one that we feel is very important. So we're putting a lot of effort into it, and I really appreciate everyone being here to learn about it. And this would be an opportunity for there to be a public trail for the community of Ramera and broader tourists as well, and to protect habitat for species at risk, habitat for all of the species that live there, and ensure that this landscape will withstand not just today, but in the future as well. So the big question, what does it take to protect 430 acres of land? So since it's waterfront, it is a big budget. So the parts of the budget, there is the cost of the land to purchase it. There's the regular things like land transfer tax and legal, just like if you were buying a house. The Conservancy also has a stewardship fund. So, what that means is that whenever we go into a property, we also raise a certain percentage as a stewardship fund to ensure that we can continue to look after it. And then for this property in particular, we've already identified that fencing will be a big piece and also cleanup. There's two derelict buildings on the property. There's a lot of garbage. If anyone here lives there, maybe they are already aware of parties that happen on the land right now. And then there's signage and staff time. So we're raising over $1.6 million, and our deadline is May the 28th, coming up kind of fast. And so far, the response from our supporters, from the community, from the Aurelia Naturalist Club, from foundations has been very strong. I, as I said, I've been with the Conservancy for a long time, and I've literally never experienced this much so fast. So we've already raised over $600,000 in the span of like 3 months. So it's keeping me busy, which is great. So we have a number of applications into foundations. There's also a couple of grants that we have done as well, but those aren't confirmed. Like we're still raising all of this money. So here's your part. You can have a part in this and donate to make this property into a nature reserve and ensure that it will be here forever. I'd love to be able to thank you for your support. Also, I can see people commenting, and I'm not able to pull the chat while I'm presenting, but I will come to it at the end. And also, I just wanted to say that we're going out on the land a few times. If you want to see it in person, we're going to coordinate a couple of dates. So feel free to shoot me an email or sign up for our monthly newsletter, and we'll make sure to make sure everyone knows about it. And with that, I just want to thank you for coming tonight and your interest in this very exciting opportunity. I'm going to stop the recording and then open it up for questions. And at that point, I will look through the chat as well. And as soon as I figure out how to stop recording,